The presentation tonight is going to have three main parts. The first is the moral teaching of the Catholic Church. And I've dubbed it the Catholic voice. Part of our job will be to bring the Catholic voice into the marketplace, to let the world know and understand the beauty in the position that creation has. I've been giving presentations for almost 2 years now. Our Holy Father, Pope Francis, has made my job easier and harder. He's made it easier because he is so eloquent. He is so passionate. He is so forthright in telling us what we have to do and the peril that we're in. It's difficult because I already had over an hour worth of material before I got the document. So I'll try to speak fast, I guess. Laudato Si, praise be. And his subtitle on the care of our common home, I believe is brilliant because we know what home is. Home is this place that we find nurturing, that we find respect, that we find holy. And we don't want to foul our home. So as we talk about our common home, this will span all of humanity, and it will call us in the very right spot that we want our home to be pristine and life-giving. In the encyclical, Pope Francis says, I would like to enter into dialogue with all of the people about our common home. Encyclicals traditionally were written for bishops. They then expanded to be written to all of Catholic people. In some recent years, to all Christians. This one, to all the people living on the earth. The earth is our home. Pope Francis says we are mistreating it. And it's beginning to look more and more like an immense pile of filth. He doesn't mince any words. He gets our attention straight up. The encyclical is really grounded in the idea that we draw, as humans, we draw our sustenance from nature, from creation. Creation he calls the first love of God for us. That is just, again, such a wonderful thing. And then he's moved with such passion because he says that we are violating that creation. And he calls it almost an act of self-destruction. As we injure our common home, we injure humanity. And he says the first to be injured are the poor, because they're closest to nature, the farmers, okay, the simple workers, those who are working day to day to get enough to live on. So he has this coupling between the health of our common home and the health of the poor. It's a very extensive document. It's readable. It's a readable document. The bookseller is out there. If you have any inclination, pick it up, buy one. You can read it. I can't do it all in 10 minutes tonight, but let me just show you a bit about what it's talking about. The introduction calls us all to this. The first chapter tells us about the difficulty that we're seeing in the world today. He then goes back and provides the gospel, the scriptural relationships of why we should care for our common home. In the document, he talks about ecology over and over again. What is ecology? It's a relationship between the living organism and his surroundings. It's a relationship between living things. So as you could see there, it's about relationship and about self-sustenance, that we provide energy, we provide health for each other from creation for the whole world. So there's a lot of big words in there about human ecology and integrated ecology and a bunch of other terms. You don't need to know those right now. As you read the book, you will. But the idea about relationship is so important. In the first chapter, he lays it out, the problem that we have with our common home. Chapter 1, Section 1, pollution and climate. And because we have to get that right, I'm going to spend most of my time talking about that first piece. However, within the first chapter, he also talks about issues with water. It's going to be a worldwide problem. Loss of biodiversity, a very significant problem. He talks about the decline in the quality of life. As creation is being degraded, the quality of human life is being degraded. He talks about equity, the problem that we have that some of the world is worried about obesity and others are worried about finding enough calories to live for the day. He also talks about weak response. The church has been talking about the degradation of climate, the problems, for over 50 years. And we haven't paid any attention. That's why he's here. That's why Pope Francis has written an encyclical, so that we stand up and take notice. Francis is not talking from an isolated position. And a few quotes in here from Blessed Paul VI. He calls ecological concern as a tragic consequence of unchecked human activity. St. John Paul says ecological crisis is a moral issue. In our society here, we say, okay, this climate stuff, well, it's a scientific issue. It's a political issue. The statement in 1990 says it's a moral issue. Let's pay attention to it, also from a moral standpoint. Pope Benedict, in his World Peace Day, said, if you want to cultivate peace, protect creation. He was very aware of the problem that as we degrade the environment, people suffer. And when people suffer, people are hungry. Borders don't mean much. Government doesn't mean much. I'm going to spend the next few slides talking very specifically about global warming and climate change and what Pope Francis suggests, urgently requests that we do about it. The first is that there's very solid scientific conclusion indicating that we are witnessing a disturbing warming of the climate system. He says that it's accompanied by a constantly rising sea level, and it's related to increased extreme weather events. In the science portion, okay, I'm going to build on some of these to give you some insight into what those parameters look like. He says that the causes of global warming are multifold, but most of the global warming in recent decades is due to a greater concentration of greenhouse gases. And again, I'll lead you through that to show you what the science is behind that. and that these greenhouse gases are mainly a result of human activity. So in 2 paragraphs, what Pope Francis said is, yes, global warming is happening, and yes, it's caused by us. The third point here, now we're down a couple more paragraphs in the encyclical. He tells us there is an urgent need to develop policies so that in the next few years, emissions of carbon dioxide and other highly polluting gases can be drastically reduced. For example, the substitution of fossil fuels and the developing of renewable energy sources. These things are talked about before, but in this encyclical, in this teaching, he brings them together and says, we can't ignore it, and we're not going to use fancy words. We're going to talk very straightforward. Okay, in Pope Francis' encyclical, he talked about protecting the poor. He also challenged us to consume less, change our habits, reduce greenhouse gases. He tells us time and time again about the integral ecology, that we're all connected together. And he calls us to care for our common home. Okay, we're gonna take the first of our breaks here. This is the end of the moral, the Catholic voice. The next one we're going to get into is about facts about the earth. But I wanted to stop right here because this was a big load all of a sudden. Give you a chance to ask a few questions if you want. You're going to have 3 chances to ask questions as the evening rolls on, and you can ask them at anything that's already been talked about. Any questions that we have at this point?
Can you explain to me what are greenhouse gases?
Yes, and we'll talk about it a bit more in just a minute, but the aspect of a greenhouse gas is a gas like carbon dioxide that has the unique characteristic that it allows sunlight to go through it uninhibited, and yet it blocks infrared radiation to go through it. Just like a greenhouse keeps stuff warm, it lets the sunshine in, it doesn't let the heat back out. Greenhouse gases have that same property. They are very specifically, the ones we're interested in here are carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and a few others. But the carbon dioxide and methane are the 2 big actors. You'll see that coming up in a few minutes. Very important concept because it's not obvious. Here's a gas, you can't see it because visible light goes right through, but the heat can't radiate back out from it. So thank you.